Hey guys, welcome to the very first episode of a series for AMTC 2024. We are looking forward to seeing you guys in November. But what we thought we'd do was have a series of podcasts leading up to the conference where we're talking to either a keynote speaker, just one of the normal presenters that's there, or maybe even somebody from the Association of Air Medical Services. But as we get going, I'm super excited to introduce our first guest, Daniel Sundahl. You probably recognize him or the name and some of his art pieces for sure. But Daniel's a keynote speaker this year at AMTC24, and I'm super excited to get to learn a little bit about him and what he's going to talk about, plus what makes him DanSun. Enjoy the episode. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of the AMTC24 podcast series. Mike Verkest back with you, and I'm super excited to introduce our first guest, Daniel Sundahl. How are you doing, brother?
Good, Mike. How are you?
Just doing good. Nice to see you. Where are you coming to us from today? You're up in Canada, right?
I'm in Canada. I'm in Western Canada in a small city just west of Edmonton. It's Bruce Grove.
Oh, nice.
So central Alberta, relatively close to the Rocky Mountains, I guess.
Nice. Are you excited about the Olympics?
Yes. Yes, I love the Olympics, but because of the time change is so different, you know what's great is if it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm trying to fall asleep, I can always just watch like live Olympics and the events.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be some obscure, event as well, like, dog skiing or surfing or who knows.
Yeah, no, I do like the Olympics. I do get into it.
Yeah. I like them too. The opening ceremonies were a little interesting to me this year, but like,
I know, right? Hey, Celine Dion, a fellow Canadian,
so
man,
that
was amazing. I thought
so good. I love Celine. I was so glad I was so glad to see her up and about and doing stuff. And
she did an amazing job. I thought
she really did.
Incredible. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you. I think most people, as I mentioned in the intro, are familiar with DanSun, the art, the amazing, powerful pictures that I think all of us as providers out there, whether you're air, ground, whatever, if you're in the biz, dispatcher, whatever, you've been moved by that. You've seen those things before. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but let's talk a little bit about you. Tell us kind of what's your story? How did you get into EMS and how did you end up where we are today?
Sure. Well, I was, how much time do we have? I'll try to compress it. Early on in my life, I realized that I wanted to live a full adventurous life. And now that I think back about it, I'm the third, I'm the youngest of three. And my brother and sister were all very close in age, but I was kind of like the baby. So I felt like since my brother and my sister made the path for me, I felt that I really needed to create my own path. And maybe that's where it came from. I'm not sure. I'm psychoanalyzing myself all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But early on in my life, I discovered that I really wanted to live a full and adventurous life. And so I traveled a lot when I was younger, lived in lots of different countries. And while I was living in the Cayman Islands, working as a bartender and a dive master, during part of our dive master training was rescue diving. And that's the first time I was introduced to, CPR and AR and all that stuff. And I saw this guy get hit by a dump truck on my way home.
Oh my gosh.
And I got so excited. I pulled over and I'm like, hey, I just learned how to do CPR. I'm going to go save this guy. And I got so excited about it. I ran up to this guy and he was like folded in half and he was gurgling. His foot was here. And I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea what to do. Wasn't sure, but I was so excited about it. I'm like, yeah, I really felt this feeling of living a full life of coming and helping this person. And that's where my brother said, well, maybe you should be a paramedic. I'm like, oh, I never thought about it, but maybe I should. And that's kind of where the idea came into my head. I didn't become a paramedic till several years later, but that's kind of how I started. I worked as a paramedic, full-time paramedic firefighter for 20 years. Was diagnosed with PTSD in 2014, which is when the artwork started as a result of the PTSD. That was kind of part of my own therapy.
Yeah.
I was shocked that other people connected to it. And then another 10 years went by and PTSD symptoms came back. And then my psychologist said, hey, yeah, no, you're done. You can't go back on the ambulance. I'm like, okay, well, now what am I going to do? So I decided to become a counseling therapist, which is what I am now. I just graduated that, and that's going to be the next path of my life.
Well, that is quite the story there. And probably one that everyone that's watching or listening can relate to in some way or another. So when you worked 20, were you with the same department the whole time?
Yes, yeah, full time. When I first graduated in 2003 as an advanced care paramedic, I worked part time at a bunch of different places
Mm,
and kind of accepted a full time position at an integrated service where I worked both as a firefighter and paramedic, which I think is why I lasted 20 years, to be honest. We worked 24-hour shifts where 24 hours on the ambulance, then I was off for 24 hours, then I worked
oh, and
24
come
hours on the
back.
fire truck, then I was off for 5 days. So it was a really great schedule. And
Hmm.
it was, the diversity was awesome and I did lots of different things and I really enjoyed it.
So you said 2014 you got diagnosed, I
Yeah.
guess for the first time, I guess, with so what was it? Did you go seek some help? Did you have an event that occurred, that like a medical issue that came up or something like that? Or like what sort of
Yeah.
led you to that diagnosis?
Well, Mike, I don't want to spoil it because this is actually part of my keynote
Okay.
presentation as
Okay, then we
but
won't do
but I
that.
will, I'll briefly mention it. So my situation, it wasn't I don't think what I thought at the time was typical where I was normal. Then I had that one call. And then
Yeah.
after that one call, I felt, oh, I'm different after that call. Like that call is haunting me. For me, it was at that point 11 or 12 years of lots of stressful calls.
Yeah.
And the symptoms slowly creeped up on me. And I didn't even know what was happening to me. And then the city employed a psychologist to come and talk to everybody, not just the emergency services department,
Oh, okay.
about PTSD, which I think is pretty forward thinking
Yeah.
for a department to do that in 2014,
Yeah, I was to say 10 years ago.
10 years ago. So when I was on shift and my captain said, we got to go listen to this guy talk about mental health. And we're all like, I got to listen to this guy talk about mental health. So we're on shift. And as this psychologist was talking about the signs and symptoms, I really related to a lot of them.
Mm,
That's the first time I thought, hey, maybe, and I was actually suicidal at that time, thinking
mm,
that was okay. And I thought, oh, maybe I won't be okay if I decide to take my life. So the next day I called. Oh, I went back to the fire hall and we were making dinner. And I asked, hey guys, did you relate to that? And they're like, oh no. And I'm like, yeah, no, me neither. I didn't relate to
oh
that. Oh,
gosh.
right, of course. So I phoned the next day and made an appointment and was diagnosed with PTSD. I had no idea. I had no idea that the symptoms I was feeling was because of um, the trauma I experienced in that career.
Yeah. So at some point you you must have been dabbling in art. I mean, I'm assuming, right? Like I think what one of the things that I found interesting even about myself was that, I've been doing EMS stuff since like 95-ish, so somewhere right in there. And I never really had much of an artistic sort of, I don't know, flair or care or even, right? But as I got a little bit older, I suddenly became interested in music and playing guitars, playing drums, getting into this sort of artistic, creating videos and just these different things. And it had never been a part of my life before. Was it a similar situation with you, or did you always sort of enjoy the artsy side of life?
Yeah, I think I was always an artistic kid growing up, and my psychologist recognized that.
Hmm.
At the time, I was doing similar looking artwork, but landscapes, pictures of my dogs. I'm a classic car guy, so pictures of classic cars and making them into paintings. And he recognized that, or he knew that's what I did. And so it was actually his idea as a way to process these feelings and complex emotions I was having is to use the creative. Now I understand, now that I'm a counseling therapist, I understand what he was doing, accessing that creative part of my brain
Hmm.
as a way to interrupt the normal traumatic pathways that have been developed. And yeah, he was right. By creating the artwork, I was artistic anyways. And God, this could be a whole other topic. I think everyone has some, or whether you're good or not is irrelevant. Is
Right.
who says your creativity is good or not. Um, so he recognized the hobby that I had already and tried to use that as part of my therapy. And that's how I started changing my artwork to represent the complex feelings and emotions I was feeling. And I was able to trap them into these two-dimensional pictures so they weren't popping in my brain and bugging me all the time.
So early on, were you just finding pictures on the internet and then transforming those pictures, or did people sort of get the word and start sending you stuff, or how did you find the pictures you were, creating?
Well, the process for me is that it starts as uh, an idea or a feeling that I'm having that I can't get rid of.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the therapy part worked. So think of a call or an emotion that just kept I describe it as an organic monster that invades my consciousness uninvited, right? And it's always there. So I focus on it and I think about it. And then as I think about it, of how I can represent this complex idea into an image, then the image pops into my head. And then I stage it with my peers or my early on pictures. It's just at my own fire department.
Yeah.
But they didn't know what I was really doing. I just, hey, let's set up this stage.
Sure.
And I would base it on that event. I'd photograph it, stage it, photograph it, and then I'd digitally draw and paint on top of that photograph how I felt. And that's where like the angels and the demons and the spirits all kind of came in afterwards. Yeah. And I didn't share those for the longest time. So well, it
was for you, right?
I mean, that's for me. Yeah, it was all for me. So I never thought that people would, I thought people would reject it initially because I was expressing my own emotions and feelings of being affected by what I've seen. Yeah. And I was scared to share that with my peers, thinking that, well, what are you doing showing emergency services in a vulnerable state? You're kind of letting people see behind the curtain.
Right.
So it was all very personal to me. And that's still what I do 10 years later. That's still how I do it. So I still have these ideas that come into my head that are complex. And, technically I would not be diagnosed with PTSD now because I no longer meet the symptoms or the criteria on the DSM-5, which is great. And that's a big part to do with my artwork and my mental health team that helped put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Yeah. But I still do the same thing. So I still create artwork for myself. I don't think, what are people going to think about it? Are people going to be offended by it? And I think that's why my artwork connects so well with my peers, is that it's very authentic. It's true to myself. And if it's true to me, then it's going to be true to others.
Yeah. So 4 art books later, right?
Yes.
I'm sure, is there anything else in the works right now, or?
Yeah, I have art galleries popping up all over the place, which is great. I love exhibiting my artwork to the public, general public, to see how they respond to the artwork. I have a large format exhibit that travels, and the pieces are 10 by 12 feet. They're massive.
Oh, wow. So
people stand and there's 14 pieces in that exhibit right now. And, yeah, so I love doing that. I travel quite a bit and I speak about, like, at the events happening in November. So I love meeting my peers, doing that, talking about trauma and post-traumatic growth, which is this gold lining around trauma that a lot of many people aren't even aware of. So it's idea of hope and recovery and actually getting better and being better because of the trauma, not despite of it. So.
Yeah. So we're going through some grief right now. Last month, our 26-year-old son unexpectedly died.
Oh, so sorry.
Oh yeah, it's
horrible.
It's as bad as you can think about, right? Yeah. It's pretty bad. But so this is really my first experience. I mean, my parents passed away 15 years ago and 10 years ago, I think it was. But this is on a different scale, right? Like this, that's the natural order of things.
Yeah.
But the reason why I bring it up is I obviously, as a provider, I've been around death and trauma and terrible things my whole life, my whole adult career. I mean, since I was 21 years old, but it was never my thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally different.
Like these deep personal, this deep emotional pain. And so that was one of the things that I had been thinking about actually a lot. It was never my thing. And then at some point it becomes your thing, right? And people have to deal with sort of deep, dark emotional pain. And they may not always think that there's a way out, or there is hope, or that there is a way to feel better. Right. And so I love that that's going to be a topic that you're going to hit at AMTC.
Yeah. And that, I'm sorry to hear about your son. That's horrible.
Yeah. It was just a random, we think, arrhythmia issue. It was just a young kid and just
and terrible. Grief, grief is another beast in itself. It is actually, there is a lot of grief that people don't maybe understand or realize with PTSD as well. And with recovery. And there is a specific model that, that we use for helping people through grief, and unfortunately, you just kind of have to work your way through it. It would be so. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just take a pill
Oh, wouldn't
and
it?
have the horrible feelings that come with that to go away, right? But
Yeah.
it's grief is really tough.
But but just the idea of that, that you're going to talk about having
Mhm.
sort of hope and being able to sort of work through those things that you're going to talk about as it relates to PTSD is
Yeah.
huge. And I think a lot of people that are probably in the depths or the throes of post-traumatic stress disorder don't feel that.
No, yeah, they don't, and often if they're that deep in it, they don't have the capacity to see it,
Right, right,
right?
right.
But if someone like me, a peer who's gone through it, uh, who is experiencing post-traumatic growth, and there's examples of it all over the place. When I talk about post-traumatic growth, I use the example of origin stories in superheroes, because every superhero origin story is that something horrible happens, and then because of that, now they have these superpowers.
Hmm.
And although that's all fictional, I see examples of post-traumatic growth in our peers all the time, and including families where family members have died. Through that grief, now they're starting foundations, or they're starting
Yes.
things in the name of that person,
Yeah.
and now they're doing great, amazing things, helping other people because of that event, which wouldn't have happened otherwise. So it is out there, and um, it's quite prevalent, I think, in the emergency services community, but we don't talk about it that much. We don't talk about, okay, if you can, there is a pathway through trauma. This happened to you, get the help you need.
Yeah.
Let's rewire your brain, however that's going to work for you. And through that rewiring and reconfiguration of your neural pathways,
Yeah.
and that growth that happens, you can actually become better because of those experiences, not worse or suffer because of them forever.
It's so interesting because we're constantly hearing about how PTSD is prevalent in our business and our industry, and how so many people suffer. But one of the things that uh, that I mean, one of the things I guess I'm thinking about is like we get bombarded with how prevalent it is, but not how much hope that there can be. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
almost like it's this separate piece. Like, oh, it's so terrible and so many people suffer. Well, true, but guess what? We can get through it. We can
Yeah.
get through it
You know
together.
what? I really like this saying in dialectical behavioral therapy is a method that I use with my clients. It's one of the methods that I use. And I really like one of the sayings that they have there is pain plus the unwillingness to face the pain equals trauma.
Oh,
And pain plus the willingness to step into that pain equals growth.
mm,
And there's a lot of experts that believe it's the trauma itself isn't the issue. It's how we deal with that trauma.
mm,
That's the issue. And a lot of our therapy is kind of circled around that. And there's a lot of hope in that too. It's what do you do with that? Like, how are you going to move forward?
yeah.
And if you can change your perspective of that, and you can become a better person because of it. And
Yeah.
it's not a theory, it's a living proof. I see it. I'm living proof of it.
Yeah. I was going to say,
Um,
you're sort of that living proof.
and there's lots of people like me out there. There's nothing really special about us. And it happens all the time, but we don't really talk too much about it. And that's why that's the focus of my presentation is post-traumatic growth and how it's possible for not superheroes, for anybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, great. Hey, man, it's been so good talking to you. If people wanted to find out more about DanSun art or about Daniel Sundahl, the guy that is a counselor now, where can they find out more?
Yeah, if you my website's dansunphotos.com is my original website. My counseling website is dansunhealth.com.
Oh,
But if you even just Google DanSun, DANSUN, I'll pop up all over the place. So I'm not that hard to find.
that's true. I can attest to that. These guys everywhere.
I might pop into your social media, even if you don't want me there. I'm going to be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. No, it's going to be so good. All right. Well, we hope we're going to see you guys at AMTC24 in Salt Lake City, November 4th through the 6th at the convention center. Like I said, I'm looking forward to going. This will be my, I think, 4th time going to be there, doing on-site podcasting, all kind of fun, different stuff like that. Daniel, great seeing you again, brother.
Yeah, you too, Mike. Thanks a lot. I really
All
appreciate
right.
it. And I'm really looking forward to the AMTC in November.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys there.